Gareth Evans is here, and he's just shot his new movie in 185. I think you're about to have a long discussion with him about ratios.
Have you heard enough about ratios, do you think, Gareth?
We could talk a little bit about it if you want.
No, I don't think so. So you filmed in what?
185.
Why?
We wanted to we didn't want to go to scope because the film needs to kind of have that.
That's a letterbox, not the letterbox.
That's 235 or 7.
We wanted to kind of maintain that claustrophobia, so to kind of bring it in a little bit tighter, then you get that same feeling.
This is Gareth Evans, who's the director of The Raid, and you also produced it, you also wrote it.
Yes, wrote, edited, directed.
Okay, for people who don't know anything about it and don't know anything about you, there is a genuine sort of astonishment where people will have sat through the film. They'll have taken in this Indonesian action film, as Mark was saying, incredible head-crunching action, non-stop, in Indonesia, in Indonesian, and then at the end it says, written and directed by Gareth Evans.
Yeah, it's quite the Welsh name, isn't it?
It is an extremely Welsh name. Just explain, before we get on to discuss the movie, just explain your story, because you're about 18, and you've come up with, there are so many people who were waiting to hear you talk on the programme. There are so many emails from people saying, this is the most astonishing and very exciting film I've seen in a very, very long time. You are the most lauded action director we've had on this show for ages. Explain how you ended up doing this movie in Indonesia.
From Cardiff,
right. So basically when I was 27, I was living in Cardiff with my wife, and in Swansea actually with my wife, and I was working back and forth in Cardiff, and I'd always kind of wanted to be in the film industry in the UK, but truthfully, like, I don't hold any grudge or anything. It was my own fault. I didn't push myself enough. I didn't really do enough to get noticed here. I'd made like a couple of short films, and I self-financed a feature film that I made, very, very low budget feature film. And then I just kind of drifted back into my 9 to 5, and she saw that, and she realised that I wasn't actually doing anything, wasn't actually pushing.
This is your wife.
My wife, yeah. She's Indonesian Japanese. Yes, then, yeah. That'll explain the link later on. And so she put in a few phone calls with a few people back in Jakarta, and one of them was to a producer who was looking for somebody to direct a documentary, and they were doing a documentary series on different elements of Indonesian culture. And the one that I got contacted to do was about pencak silat, which is the martial art from Indonesia then. And so I was really interested and thought, like, well, this is like 6 months. I get to go off. I had nothing to lose and just, try and learn something new about it.
Quite a leap of faith from them to ask this
for sure.
Welshman who they didn't know to direct a movie about Indonesian culture.
Exactly, yeah. They'd seen my first feature, and they'd seen some of the work I'd done, and they were looking for somebody to come to it with an outsider's viewpoint on the culture.
And you did definitely bring that.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you.
So right, and you talked about this martial art that's indigenous to Indonesia.
Yes.
So it's very important that you explain what it is and how it's different, because that is the link into this movie.
Yeah, I as a kid growing up, I was a big fan of like Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee and everyone else, and I'd watched so many martial arts films, so I thought I knew about every martial art. I thought I knew everything about Kung Fu and Karate and Muay Thai and Aikido, but I'd never heard of pencak silat before. And when I went out there to learn about it, I realized that it was very adaptable. They can kind of change to every different circumstance. So whether you're in a very sort of tight claustrophobic space or in a wide open space, there are different methods and different techniques you can use to defend yourself from it. But I also kind of fell in love with the philosophy behind it as well.
Which is what?
Well, it's kind of interesting in a way, because like some of the teachings, Silat actually predates Islam, but Indonesia is like a predominantly Muslim society there. And as over time, basically, Islam has kind of become more fused with Silat, with the discipline, with the teaching of it as well. Like, for instance, in Iko's style, Iko's the lead actor of the film, in his style of Silat, there's one movement which is based on like a preparation before you pray called wudu, which is when you wash your arms before you pray. So there's a very sort of like quick sort of like hit up the arms and back down again, which is directly from Islam. So I just found it really fascinating that these kind of like cultural and religious influences were kind of a part of the martial art as well.
And this is the martial art and how do you pronounce your main? So is it Iko Uwais?
Iko Uwais, yeah.
Iko Uwais.
Yeah.
Okay, and so is he using that particular martial art discipline, or is everybody using it?
He's using it, and also Yayan Ruhian, one of the other choreographers who played a character called Mad Dog. He also
sounds Welsh.
Yeah, I know Yayan.
Yayan?
Exactly. I always get looks like that back home when I say, "Oh yeah, Yayan's one of the choreographers." Now, Yayan. But yeah, so he was one of the martial artists that does Silat as well. But then we kind of mix it in. Then a lot of the other fighters, they have like different backgrounds. Some of them do Taekwondo. Joe Taslim, the guy who played Jaka, he does judo. He's a judo national champion in Indonesia. So we kind of try to incorporate different martial arts disciplines so that it kind of keeps looking fresh, so that each fight has a little different character to it.
Sorry, Mark. Just tell us the story of The Raid, and then we can
Okay, so the storyline for the raid is about an Indonesian SWAT team that are going to raid a building which is owned by a drug baron. And the idea is that this building hasn't been touched for over 10 years. And as a result of that, the owner of the place has been able to rent out rooms to any gang or criminal that needs to keep their head down. And so on this one day when the SWAT team go in, they take the place floor by floor. And once they reach the 6th floor, they get spotted. So the owner of the building locks the entire building down and basically puts out a call to everyone staying there that if they want to stay there rent-free, all they have to do is kill off all the cops. And so it turns into like a survival horror film then, where they have to try to fight in order to survive and get out.
There was an interview in which you said that the tower block came from Die Hard and the central claustrophobia came from Assault on Precinct 13. And of course, I remember when Die Hard first came out, the writer of Die Hard, whose name escapes me now, said that basically when he was doing Die Hard, he was trying to do Cowboys and Indians meet the Towering Inferno.
Oh, cool.
And one of the things I really like about the raid is that you're very upfront about the references, you're very upfront about where those ideas came from, and you have evidently a love of genre cinema, which that it seems to me to be based on having watched loads of movies, and decided what you like about those movies, and just take from them what you need.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I decided to kind of make a film which was going to be all set within one location, that one building, that's what I did. I went back to kind of research all those films that I loved watching growing up. So it was Die Hard, Assault on Precinct 13, even like District B 13, Rec 1 and 2, and all these different films. And
Rec 1, but
Rec 1. 2. I quite like 2 actually, but but for me it was like taking a look at all these movies and then almost in a sort of analytical way, figuring out the structure of them, figuring out down to a point of how much time is allocated to the bad guy, how often do we need to keep going back and forth, and trying to figure out how to structure this in a way and take the best elements of each of those films then.
And what about that you've got this really interesting way of shooting that you shoot correct me if this is wrong, you shoot everything on a handheld video camera to get the shots worked out, and then when you actually get onto the set you replace them with proper shots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's like this came from the first film. We did a film called Marantau about in 2009, which was like our first attempt at doing something with Silat and our first attempt at a martial arts film. And we were very aware back then that we had come into this as a Southeast Asian country making martial arts film, so naturally we would then be compared to films in Hong Kong and Thailand. Now Hong Kong and Thailand have already kind of had decades of sort of practice at this, of perfecting their craft. We were on our first movie, and this is only our second film, so we were kind of trying to figure out what can we do in order to prepare for this. And one of those things was to kind of say, okay, well, let's just do this video storyboard. Let's make sure that we know exactly how our fights are going to look before we're even in production. And it was kind of a safety net, really. That's what it was designed as. But it's just become like a part of the process now that we feel like we rely on so much, that it helped us so much in terms of making sure that the fights look right.
Did you literally edit together the original raw footage, and then the story is that you would physically drop in the new shots as they were done, so you'd have a kind of like a template of the movie building up over the time?
For sure, yeah. We spent like 3 months on it, and it's like one of those things where like I work with Iko and Yain on the choreography quite closely with them, so doing 3 months of work with them on that, I feel like I have like an obligation to make sure that action choreography is seen clearly, and that each shot kind of counts then. And it kind of goes back to what Jackie Chan did in the 80s, was every shot being like a jigsaw piece. So that was kind of like the process behind it then.
And one interesting point from someone who's never edited a film or likely to edit a film is that I understood everything that was happening in the fight, which seems to be completely against the way most fights are edited now, which is so fast that you go, I mean, this looks quite impressive, but who's winning? Who's that? But in your fight sequences, they are very straightforward to follow. You can see who's doing what to whom.
Yeah, I think like nowadays there tends to be an over-reliance on sound effects to fill in the gaps. So it's like you're not actually seeing anything, but you're hearing hits and impacts. But what we want to do is take that step back and just go back to the films. Because the thing is, when I watch action films, if I watch an action film back at home and I put a DVD on, it's almost always a film from the 80s or the early 90s. And those are the films I keep coming back to all the time. And it's always that golden age of Hong Kong cinema.
There is, the word that you used was choreography. And I mean, I talked about this on a blog recently, that actually for me, the best of those movies, the best martial arts movies, but actually I think in general, best physical action movies, are closer to musicals, to dance numbers than anything else, and that's the way they should be understood. And there is, in terms of the way in which the fight scenes are, they are choreographed like dance numbers, and it is amazing how close those two disciplines are.
It's interesting you say that, because when we're actually doing the choreography, we clap along. We figure out what the rhythm is to the fight. So the idea between like how many blocks there are before a punch is kind of like percussion. So you kind of work it out. You kind of clap along. You go dun 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 dun, and then you figure out now's the punch, or now's the time to shoot the person, and things like that. So it does. It takes on a certain musical form, and the
so
guys.
This could be The Raid the musical. They could
exactly.
Well,
yeah.
you know, I mean, I genuinely think those two things are connected, and I think that when you've satiated yourself with movies about people kicking each other in the head, you should make a musical, because I think in a way that the two things are very, very close.
It's actually a genre I'd love to try at some point in my life.
Okay,
so
there we go.
we'll see.
We're going to talk more with Gareth, talking about The Raid. If you want to get involved, there are stacks of emails which we'll get to in just a moment. It's Mayo at bbc.co.uk. I've just bitten my lip, so while I mop up further spillages, Orna will fill the gap. I just thought I'll
try.
I just thought, if Gareth
It's like being in a room with a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Mum, I've spilt the tea. Mum, I've bitten my lip. I've shot my finger in the door.
More importantly, Gareth is here. He needs blood.
Okay, fine.
There needs to be blood. Orna Merchant's got the travel. So we're talking to Gareth Evans. He's the director, writer, and producer of The Raid. We haven't played you a clip. So so we're going to do that. I'm not sure which section of the movie
We
this comes from.
should say in advance that one of the great problems with multiplex distribution in the UK is that it's very hard to get subtitled movies into widespread multiplex distribution, because for some reason there is an idea that multiplex audiences don't like subtitles. The Raid looks like it's going to open fairly big, and it is a subtitled movie. I believe it's one of those movies you can understand in any language. Here's why.
And so on.
That took so long to script, that scene.
Do you know what scene that was?
Yeah, that was the machete gang fight in the hallway.
Okay. So we were talking about it beforehand, Gareth, and I was suggesting that it is a subtitled film, but the reason why that probably won't count against it is because even if there aren't subtitles, it's pretty straightforward to follow, isn't it? There's a guy. We know he's a good guy. We see him with his pregnant wife. He's praying at the beginning of the film. We want him to get back to his pregnant wife so that he can be a father.
Exactly.
He's in this raid. The raid goes wrong. He's against bad guys. And then there's lots of that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And that's kind of what happens.
Yeah. I mean, like martial arts films, they tend to be quite like universal, I think, in a way. Same like horror, I think, and action cinema. So it kind of... It's one of those genres that's able to kind of travel well, I feel.
Here's some listener correspondence. Stephen in Edinburgh just returned from a screening of The Raid. The film was incredible, head-crunching action that genuinely didn't let up, and it isn't being screened widely enough. My local World of Cine is only showing it today and tomorrow.
Really?
To make way for more tat from Michael Bay or something like that. Seems like Wales can sing and direct incredible action movies. In terms of direction, it would be the best directed action film I have ever seen. Right up there with Hard Boiled. Superb stuff. What's Gareth going to do next?
Wow, wow, that's a great comment. Actually, next up is the sequel to The Raid, and we're going to start doing that in January next year.
It's The Raid 2.
Raid 2, yeah.
Are you calling it Raid 2?
I don't know. Yeah,
Oh,
we're trying to figure
call
out.
it something else.
I wanted to call it something else actually, because I didn't want to actually put just the numeric on the end of it. But in Indonesian, it's going to be called Berandal. But Berandal means like thug or delinquent. It doesn't really kind of work in English then. So we're trying to figure out what a
My
good
guess is that
translation
your
would be.
main guy, Eco, he's now a father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's one right step, yeah.
Okay. And some stuff happens.
Yes.
And he's really good at this martial art that you've told us all about.
You're like Tim Robbins in The Player. This is magic.
And he kicks lots of people in the head, and he probably escapes.
That's quite a
can have
curious
that,
take
by the
on
way.
it.
Somebody
yeah.
tweeted
I'm going to use that.
Somebody tweeted that The Raid was, what do they call it, crouching, die-hard, hard-boiled dragon, which I thought was
Nice.
actually, if you can make a version of that would work well.
This from Stephen, BA Film Studies and First Place Wanted poster design, Pontins 1991. Guys, I've just got back this afternoon from watching The Raid. All I can say is, wow. The best action film in years. I cannot remember the last time I heard gasps from the audience. Brutally exhilarating throughout. This is how action films should be. I cannot wait to see what Gareth Evans does next.
The gasp from the audience thing is interesting because I saw it it was a 6:30 screening, and a mag screenings happen in the evening, which tend to be sort of a different crowd to the national press shows. National press shows happen in the morning, and they tend to be the older end of the market, which I am now because I'm pushing 50. Magazine screenings tend to be young people who can stay up after 8:30, and even in the mag screening that I saw at 6:30, there was loads of people, myself included, going, oh, blimey, because it is the art of it is, and it's the same. I'll say this again about directing musicals, making those blows feel like it is a physical experience, and I must congratulate you. It is a really physically well directed piece of action cinema, and I think in a way people don't really understand just how complicated it is. I have seen enough of those movies that are really boring to be really impressed when you get it right, and you've got a real old school feel for doing that stuff, and it's a real punch of a film.
Oh, cheers! That means a lot. Actually, it really means a lot.
Because you listen to the show on a fairly regular basis.
Yes, I do. Yes, yeah. I've been downloading the podcast for about maybe 4 or 5 years now, actually. So because I was talking earlier, I was saying I was quite anxious because obviously I'd heard the Sex and the City 2 rant, so I was thinking, okay, how's it going to go with this one? So.
But the critical response has been pretty good. I mean, I know I read there was a couple of sniffy reviews in America. I think that Roger Ebert wasn't crazy about it, but generally the critical response has been a huge thumbs up. I mean, I saw today, front page of the Guardian is 5 stars.
Yeah, we had 5 stars.
Pete Bradshaw, who is known for liking perhaps more art house fare, although you got the movie completely.
Yeah, I mean it's been pretty incredible. I mean it's all started since that first premiere in Toronto last year in September, and truthfully, me and my producer, we were very pessimistic about it. When we finished the film, we didn't really know what the reaction was going to be like.
Right.
So it's kind of overwhelmed us.
This from Husnell. I hope I've got the pronunciation right. Hello, I'm a regular listener of Wittertainment going back to 2008. I've enjoyed Mark's recounting his phobias of elevator and fruit, and Michael Bay. And I am a native Indonesian. It is a surprise to find that Gareth is your guest. As a former practitioner of the Indonesian traditional martial art, the Pencak Silat, I'd like to thank Gareth for bringing it to the world stage. I liked the choreography, the rhythms, the physical movements, and the upbeat feel and adrenaline throughout the film, although I cringed every now and again due to the violence. And hello to Jason Isaacs. Is there any Jason Isaacs reference in the film?
Unfortunately, no, but maybe in the next one we put out a big hello to him.
I think that would be a very good
The cringing
idea.
is right, and it is worth it. It is you do cringe. You do. It's tough. I mean, it is proper tough.
Here's a dissenting voice from Andrew, who sends this email. I went to preview a couple of weeks ago, drawn in by the critical buzz that I had heard and the quotes about it being the best action film in years. Very early in the film, we see 3 men being shot in the head and 1 being set about with a hammer. Now, I don't have a problem with extreme violence, but I like it to be for a reason. Everything you see in Goodfellas, for example, is in the service of character. The most frightening moment in that film features no violence at all. It's the moment in a restaurant when Joe Pesci is asking Ray Liotta, in what way is he funny? Okay, and everyone is nervous because they know exactly what he's capable of. The tension is nerve-tightening. In The Raid, however, the violence is its own reward, and it is relentless. A man in the row behind me left after 15 minutes, and I understand why. By that point, it had become apparent that this was a film whose main interest was in exploring in how many different ways it is possible to eviscerate a man. While some of it is elegantly choreographed, unless you get your kicks watching blood spurt from severed veins, it gets dull pretty quickly.
Not a fan then.
Well,
I know it's fine. I mean, it's expected. I mean, when we made this film, really, we made it for ourselves, and I have a certain violence threshold, and I think The Raid is kind of at that level of what I'm willing to go.
What's beyond your threshold?
I mean, I've watched other movies. There's a lot more violent movies out there that exist. I'm a big fan of films like Ichi the Killer and all these films, and they are much more aggressively violent. Yeah, but this was my threshold. This is where I was going to take it, and my plan really was to kind of make something that, yes, it's violent, but I didn't want it to be repulsively so. So
it isn't sadistic.
No, that's the thing, and this is actually something that kind of comes back from the influence I take from my father. My father, when I was growing up, we'd watch all these different films together, on video, and my dad always had a thing where action and violence can be entertaining. The only problem he drew a line at is when it became cruel. And that was one thing that I kind of tried to avoid in this, that we don't really focus on suffering and pain. It's just,
you cut away basically before someone suffers too bad.
But I do think that it's a valid criticism in saying, it is about action fight scenes, and it is in the same way, and I'm sorry to harp on, but in the same way that musicals are about dancing. And I absolutely accept there'll be a section of the audience who aren't interested in that, and who don't. If you don't get the visceral pleasure of watching choreographed fighting, then yes, you aren't going to enjoy it. There's no question about that. It is not a film for everybody, but in the area in which it exists, I think it is a very well executed piece of work. And I agree with you about it is very very violent without being very cruel. I think that is a key distinction. The only thing I'd worry about is if you're going to do a sequel, where are you going to go? I don't mean literally, but it's just, in a way, as I said, what I want to see you now is I want to see you do a musical. I want to see you do a musical comedy.
We got 30 seconds left. It's already been signed up for an English remake, is that right?
Yes, it's been signed up for a US remake, but I'm...
Who's directing it?
We don't know yet. I'm not directing it. I kind of stepped away from that.
But what do you think?
I'm kind of flattered by it, For me, on a business level, it's great because it kind of gives us a little bit more publicity for the original. So in that respect, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and from a critical point of view, can I say it's a stupid idea? It doesn't need remaking. It doesn't. If you go and see it with subtitles, it's fine. There is no point in just saying, "Oh, this movie's great, but it's foreign. Let's do it again, but in American."
Gareth, maybe in 3D.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be good. Gareth Hugh Evans is the director of The Raid. We appreciate you coming in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And now you've been downloading us long enough. It's been nice to have you on the program. Come back and talk to us again. Yeah,
absolutely.